Good afternoon. My name is Allison Picott, and I am the Executive Director here at the Lenny Zakem Fund. And it is my pleasure to welcome those of you here in the audience today and those of you watching to our Fall Bridge Builder. I'm going to pass the mic to my colleague, Aditi Dalakia, our Deputy Director, who is going to introduce and then lead the panel in our discussion. And I invite those of you in the audience to ask questions, offer up your own stories, and consider this a safe space and a place where we can have an interactive and really interesting discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for Voices of Resilience. We're here to listen to immigrant stories in Greater Boston's nonprofit sector from three amazing individuals who lead and work at organizations that are both current and former grantee partners of the Lenny Zakem Fund. And today's conversation was really sparked by a conversation that had been had earlier this year, where we were just discussing, the rich stories that are in our community and in our network, and the way that we use, what we learn and what we experience from our backgrounds and from those experiences in the work and how that's informed. And so we want to acknowledge that there are some really incredible stories in the room, not just on our panel, but in our audience and for folks watching as well. And we're always excited to hear those stories and to uplift them and acknowledge them as a really vital part of our work. So as Allison mentioned, my name is Aditi. I'm Deputy Director at the Lenny Zakem Fund, and it's my absolute honor to be here in conversation with Asha, Nahid, and Francisco, who I will allow to introduce themselves as well. Just so you have a sense of the day today, we are going to have a panel discussion for about 30 to 40 minutes, give or take, depends on how much they have to say. And then we'll make some room for questions, and if anyone else wants to contribute their stories, and just have that interactive discussion, as Allison mentioned. So I will pass it over to Asha first, and if you could introduce yourself, your organization, and just talk a little bit about what brings you to this work, that would be great.
Thank you. My name is Asha Abdullahi, and I'm the founder of the organization called Somali Parents Advocacy Center for Education. We call it SPACE. I came here, this country, as a refugee, so I wanted to share that story. Immigrant and refugees are different, even though we came to the country to seek for opportunities. So I left my country when the Civil War happened in 1991, and I lived in a refugee camp for almost 3 years before I arrived to the United States. So growing up in a country where there's not that much opportunity for people with disability, I wanted to share with you what I do right now is support parents who have kids with disability. And what led to me that work is I have a son who was diagnosed autism when he was about 8. My son didn't receive early intervention because I didn't know how to identify or recognize developmental disability or developmental delayed. So creating this space is to help the other mothers who are struggling to understand about their child's behavior or difficulty learning at school or engaging the community, because we have a stigma surrounded in our community about people with disabilities, so they don't come out a lot. So creating the space means to come and to share their story, and started sharing my own story first to create a parent support group. So it took me 4 years to come out with the organization, but it was worth it. Now we have almost 200 and more families to come in our center and learn about not just a disability, but also mothers where they can come and share their concern and sharing stories and helping each other and supporting each other with or without kids with disability.
Thank you, Asha. Nahid, if you don't mind.
My name is Nahid Isar. I'm Executive Director at Asian Women for Health. I first came to the US as a Fulbright scholar about 12 years ago, went back to my home country, Afghanistan, worked for both nonprofit and nonprofit and government in Afghanistan. And one of the benefits of being in a government was I could predict the country's collapse about 3 years ago. So decided to leave about 3 years ago. And I started teaching at University of Arkansas. And Asian Women for Health brought me here in Boston about 2 years ago. Asian Women for Health is a nonprofit organization that helps Asian women and underserved people access equitable healthcare. And we do it through research, through representation, and through education. Our biggest program, and probably our most impactful program, is training community health workers and then placing them with our partner organizations, including BMC and MGH and a few other hospitals and healthcare sectors. Aside from that, we also conduct community conversations to understand community needs from community perspectives. We often go to communities with a preconceived notion, and we often, unfortunately, misinterpret especially the needs, especially as Asha mentioned, health needs that are stigmatized in diverse populations. And then the other part is we conduct monthly workshops where we talk about health issues, talk and educate communities on health issues that are stigmatized. What brought me to my work is being an educated woman, being educated in the US, I found it so difficult to navigate this extremely complicated health system. And as an Asian woman, at one point I decided to leave teaching. I hope there's no teacher here, but I just wanted to see a firsthand impact, and I saw it at Asian Women for Health.
Thank you, Nahid. And finally, Francisco.
Yes, hi everyone, Francisco. I am the co-op developer at Center for Cooperative Development and Solidarity, based in East Boston. The organization started out of anti-displacement, anti-gentrification work, and now we have multiple programs specifically supporting worker-owned cooperatives in the immigrant community specifically. I came about this work during the pandemic, like many kids my age, doing mutual aid. And I'm from Laredo, Texas, originally, right on the border. And that really opened my perspective to how we can provide economic opportunity to those most underserved. And in the case of Laredo, it is considered a food desert. So one of my first experiences was doing a grocery cooperative in Laredo, Texas. And fortunately, I was able to take this opportunity here in CCDS. And I've been about 2 years now in this position. And we have multiple programs, like I said, but specifically, we help the immigrant community start their own worker cooperatives.
Thank you. What I'm hearing from all three of you is just the ways in which there's such diversity in the communities here and all the various things that we need, and so many things that for those of us, so I'm from the US, but my parents are immigrants, and it's so interesting to consider the things that I might take for granted that my parents had to learn from scratch here, and kind of understanding the way that those experiences that each of you have had are informing the work that you do, and how your cultural background or heritage also impacts your work, and the way that shows up. So if you could each talk a little bit about that, and maybe Francisco, this time I'll start with you.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think, being a border town, born and raised, I think that really gave me a perspective of the relationship between the two countries, and specifically their economic relationship. And it made me understand that there was a need for providing, specifically reducing that racial wealth gap that exists everywhere. And it's much more prevalent in border communities where, US companies are so used to hiring Mexican workers on the other side. So as I said, doing mutual aid, it really, through a good friend of mine, he mentioned, if you're liking this work that we're doing, you might be interested in cooperatives. And that really opened my eyes to seeing, okay, there is a way that we can structure the economy right that provides opportunity to everyone. And cooperatives have a long history. They're not a nascent a movement. It's something that has been going on for centuries. And unfortunately, we've lost that way of relating to each other economically. And now we're trying to recuperate that and trying to see, how can we actually benefit people that have historically been, excluded from economic opportunity, and cooperatives have historically been that solution. And we like to say that we're also part of the solidarity economy movement, which is a much broader movement, which there is some synergy between them. But the solidarity economy movement is something that includes other types of projects and solutions, such as community land trust, credit unions, for example. So this is something that we're trying to implement with a lot of other organizations, some allies here as well, from CED, who's our fiscal sponsor, actually, Center for Economic Democracy. And we're trying to see how we can actually build the city up again in a way that actually provides everyone equal opportunity, economically speaking. And I think it goes without saying that the city needs a lot of revitalization, and we do believe that cooperatives and solidarity economy can provide that stability for the city and hence the immigrant community specifically.
Thank you, Francisco. Nahid, if you want to share your story. Absolutely. The question is how your lived experience and or cultural backgrounds or heritage impact your approach to this work, and sort of how it gets carried out at Asian Women for Health and generally in your work in the nonprofit sector.
Like I mentioned earlier, I came to the US about 3 years ago, and I was a Fulbright scholar here, so I did my studies here. English wasn't the biggest barrier for me, but I found it so difficult to navigate the health system here. To give you one small example, so I went to my physician, and on my maternal side, we have a history of cancer. So I was telling my physician about my maternal side's history of cancer, and then the physician's immediate response was, well, when you turn 40, make sure to do a mammography. Now, the age 40 is for a Caucasian woman. For Asian women, because of all the DNA differences, the recommended age is 35. And I told my physician, I kept asking my physician, I said, no, I know, I've done research about it. And then the physician said, no, he just wrote a paper and said, well, you have to go to this hospital or this doctor when you turn 40. So it's seeing firsthand that there is a barrier, there is a gap more than barrier, and with certain Asian population, Asians are also the highest population that speak a language other than English. Language is the biggest barrier. And then added to that, cultural differences is the second biggest barrier. To share another example, I went to an event and I talked to a woman in her 60s. And within the first few seconds, she said she has mental health. And then my response was, well, I'm not the right person. You need to reach out to this organization, this place. And then her response was, oh, are you kidding me? The minute I go to a doctor, I will be labeled in my community, A. B, I will be deported immediately, because I've been told by the community that the minute the government finds out that you have mental health, quote unquote, issues, you will be deported. So there are layers and layers of cultural barrier, linguistic barrier, systematic barrier within Asian population. And my experience, I wouldn't say part of my experience helped shape the vision and the strategy of the organization, but I also want to make sure to be in constant touch and in constant communication with communities. I was reading this book about health disparities in Asian population. In fact, I'm reading it right now. And it talks about 8 different layers of Asian immigration in the US between 90-somethings, and it breaks it down into decades and years. And you see with each different era, there are different barriers. So it is important to be constantly in touch with the communities, to unlearn the learnings, and just go to the community with an open mind and an active ear.
Thank you, Nahid, so much in both of your responses. And Asha, I'll give you a chance to speak to the question as well.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I grew up in Somalia, and the work I do right now is helping parents who have kids with disability. So, and I talked about that earlier because disability is something we don't talk about it, the thing we don't share. Even your own family, they don't share with you. So when I see now people, and I started this organization, a lot of people told me, nobody's gonna come out, nobody's gonna share this story. But it takes one person to share their story sometime, and you encourage one by one every day. So instead of asking, they're hiding, we have to ask why they're hiding, why they're not coming out. The experience they have back home was they couldn't bring their kids to the community because they were getting looks like, your kids are not, they're misbehaving, you're not training them to be in respecting other people's spaces, or they might say the mother, you might did something wrong and that's why your child is like this. So instead of blaming them why they're not coming, we need to educate them and tell them, we're not in Somalia right now, we are United States, and there's a lot of opportunity is available. But then when they go to the school, it's another barrier. So when the parents share their concern, the school, sometimes they don't listen to them, or they might say, this is what your child can do. If I give you an example, my own son, when he was about second grade, they say he cannot be eligible to go to inclusive class, so he can be in separate class. And my son at that time, I didn't know how to advocate for him, but I have friends I work with. I work MGH for almost 20 years now. So I got support the doctors I work with, and I share my concern, and I did second, they call independent evaluation outside the school. So then my son was saying he qualified to go to inclusive class. If I can make the short story is, 2 years later, my son was #1 in math in the whole school when he started inclusive class. So sometimes what I fight for always is give the kids for opportunity and make sure you don't just listen to one doctor or one school, what they told you. Get evaluation, and the parents, what we teach is how to know their rights, what is the evaluation criteria, and also they have that right to evaluate outside the school. And when it comes back to the community, we do a lot of community outing, so that way community can see, this community, these children, they have a right to be part of their community. And another thing I do is I do what they call culture brokers. So I do presentation for healthcare providers and other agencies who work with our kids. So now our kids can go to concert, they can go to museum, they can go to the cruises, they can go everywhere. And the family will not feel shame. They say this is our rights to be part of the community. And it takes to start your story and share and help each other.
Absolutely. There's so much commonality in what I'm hearing, and this the layers, I think, of different elements that go into each of your stories. There's language justice, there's economic justice, there's access to resources, and whether or not those resources are equitably distributed and things like that. There's also, when you consider, generational dynamics as well. There's my grandparents come to this country to visit, and my parents, as I said, are immigrants. And when my grandparents need medical attention in this country, we are also reliant on nonprofits to provide that care. Because the American medical system is not easily navigable for those needs. And you also consider, for me, I have the privilege of, as someone who was born in the US, to travel anywhere as well. And so you also have to consider, Nahid, you're mentioning that people are so concerned about being acknowledged by the government, that might lead to their having to leave this country and leave these opportunities, that they might not seek the care that they need, or they might not be able to work toward the opportunities that we tout are available to everyone in this country, when we know that that's not the case. And so there's so many layers to this conversation, and there's so many commonalities across various immigrant populations. So wherever you're coming from, you're dealing with barriers like language barriers and barriers in access, but then there's also so many nuances and unique characteristics of each population as well that it's hard enough to keep track of just supporting immigrants, as a general population, and then you have to take into consideration the unique needs, the cultural elements, and the things like that. So thank you so much for sharing those stories. And it does bring me to sort of the next question, which is sort of what opportunities might there be for sort of increased either support or collaboration between organizations or support from funders and other communities, especially to uplift immigrant experiences and continue to support the work that is being done at your organizations and at your peer organizations as well. What opportunities are there? And Nahid, if I can come to you first for that question.
Of all the programs we do at Asian Women for Health, 2 programs I find most impactful and beneficial is our community health work, training and job placement program, and our monthly health education. I do want to touch on what you said, uniqueness. One of the things I love about our community health work program is it's not about integration into health system. It's about bringing that rich, unique background and basically bridging between your communities and health sectors. Community health workers are trusted members of their communities, are people who can speak their community's language, are people who can understand their community's needs. And unfortunately, in most cases, actually have medical background in their home countries. They are doctors and physicians in their home countries, and they come to the US and all of a sudden all their credentials are useless. So they do even have that medical background. If any program I do see a potential partnership, collaboration, and need to expand is our community health work program. Another program, which is to some extent relevant to our community health work program, is our community conversations. So we go to communities, to diverse Asian communities, and just actively listen to communities' health needs.
Thank you, Nahid. Asha? What opportunities are there for collaboration or increased support from philanthropy and collaboration between nonprofits or with philanthropy in this work to support immigrant communities?
I think to increase more training for people who want to be advocacy, and also self-advocate. So give opportunity people with disability to have their own space where they can learn and perspective, instead of other people advocate for them, so they can learn how to advocate for themselves. Because they always say, without us, it's not us. So it has to come from them, and we have to listen to them. They know what's good for them.
Thank you. And Francisco?
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a lot of opportunity for other nonprofits and foundations and philanthropies to support this work. I think one of the biggest barriers that the immigrant community faces in doing worker cooperatives is access to capital. And there is an opportunity where philanthropies and foundations can play that role of redistribution because in other ways, or the other really alternative, which for immigrant communities is a big risk, is debt products, right? And debt products, are carrying hefty interest rates these days. And this is really a way that we can really provide the immigrant community some opportunity. Also through tools as like program-related investments, PRIs. That's something that, in addition to grant making and operations, that's something that can really push our cooperatives forward. And even most importantly, I think, is the opportunity for land and property to be put back in the community's hands. And that's something that we're really heavily involved in right now. And that is something that I think not only would benefit holistically the immigrant community, but also the economy of the city, right? Because there is so much, we know the problem of commercial properties being empty, and this is a way, right, to provide everyone that opportunity that they've so historically been left out of. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunity either directly to cooperatives or to movements that we are also part of bringing back land and property into the community's hands.
Thank you, Francisco. And I want to uplift something that you're saying, and I'm also hearing a thread of it in what Nahid and Asha have been saying, which is this element of conformity or assimilation. I had an experience a few years ago where I took a photo with my family around the holidays, and I shared it with somebody who told me once they saw that photo, "Oh, your family looks like the picture of American assimilation." And I was like, I don't know what that means, and that feels a little uncomfortable to receive. And so this concept of recognizing that immigrants, when they come to this country, they bring their own experiences and understandings of systems, and it kind of, then there's an expectation to conform to or assimilate to the systems and practices here, including things like language and other elements. And what I'm curious to hear from you all about is really how you grapple with this tension between needing to work within systems in order to receive, the resources and care that you might need, but also recognizing that these systems are not working and we need to find alternative solutions and break out of those systems as well. And the push and pull between that, I think some of that comes through, Francisco, when you talk about cooperatives. Maybe you can start by sharing what that tension feels like or how you might address it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting space to be involved in because there is a lot of needing to understand systems in order to work through them and transcend them. And that is something that, unfortunately, when we come here as immigrants, as you mentioned, we lose all our work, all the credit that we've done, all the professional work that we've done. So it's really a way of we having to start over and assimilating into systems, and that's not what we want to do. We really want to break that barrier of constantly resisting, right? And we want to really build an alternative. And I think that's what the co-op and the solidarity economy movement offer. They offer an alternative to those who have been historically marginalized, right? To actually become part of the future, of become part of, having the same opportunity that everyone else has been afforded to. So I think that's something that is a big difficulty of trying to navigate existing systems and at the same time transcending them and creating something new. So it is a constant contradiction of having to balance systems, yeah.
Thank you. Nahid or Asha, do either of you want to respond to that?
I just want to say, to me, the US is like a salad bowl. It's different groups, different diverse groups coming together, not necessarily assimilating, but coming together. And that's the beauty of salad. You see green, yellow, red. And we do try to bring that in our work. We are a small nonprofit organization, but we speak about 18 Asian languages. So we all come from different parts of the world. And at the end of the day, I do believe that just constant communication, understanding both your communities, but also educating providers and your stakeholders on specific community needs, on tailored community needs, and then just advocating and pushing for it every now and then.
For us also, it's a small organization, and we collaborate with other agencies who support people with disability. And another thing we do is we share Culture Day, and we do events together. A year ago, we had an event. We did an organization named Black Autism Coalition, and we rented a space together, which we share the expenses and the food. And we didn't want our family to eat separately. And the reason I'm mentioning that is we are Muslims, so we don't eat pork material. So we say that's the only one can divide us. So if we don't bring a pork, but we can bring all this Haitian, other African food, bring it together, then we can have a beautiful event. And that's what we did. And we're doing that this year and next year. And I think more we collaborate and more we share. And for us, our family also to go to the swimming with their hijab, we did that. So we learn in each other, and we are, a happy family when we come together.
Yeah, I think uplifting that element of collaboration and shared experiences, the more we can understand one another in community, the more we're able to work together to move things forward. Absolutely. I want to end with a question about what's something that you're working on that you might be excited to share with this group. It could be a project, at your organization, something new, something that you've been doing but you just want to uplift, anything like that. Asha, maybe I'll start with you first.
Thank you. I'm very excited to share this. When I started this work, my focus was finding families who already have kids with disability and need support. So right now we're starting, actually this month, the next 4 years, a project we're focusing about early intervention. So we're doing more about teaching our community child development, signs to look for if the child are not making their milestones. So that way we can minimize kids to be identified late and miss a lot of time for their development. Same thing what happened to my son and many members in my community. So that's what we're working on. And I have so many volunteers who are working with us, and those are the siblings of those families. So we are working together as a community. So it's gonna change many lives, I hope.
That's awesome, Asha. Thank you. Nahid?
I'm not sure if I'm excited about it or not, but I'm working on our organization strategy, 5-year strategy, and mission and the work we do, prioritizing certain programs, and it's definitely not exciting.
It will be once it comes to fruition, right? You're just in the middle of it right now. Francisco?
Yeah, well, we are lots of excitement over here. There's this opportunity right now that at the same time it is opportunity and there's a barrier in the sense of that a lot of these cooperatives need commercial space, right? And specifically in East Boston, given the historical displacement and gentrification of it, many of these immigrant communities do not have the opportunity to move into these commercial spaces that are asking for $7,000, $8,000 rent on a monthly basis, right? So what we're doing as an organization is that CCDS is currently in the process. We have put in an offer. We're in the purchase and sale agreement of a historic building in East Boston. And we hope to have our childcare cooperative there, our sewing cooperative there, and to stabilize the rent for the businesses that already exist there. There's 2 businesses that are owned by the immigrant community, and we want to be able to support them long-term, right, to stabilize that rent so that they can stay in the community and they can live where they work. And so that's something that we're really excited about, and we hope it comes to fruition. But obviously, the real estate market is quite difficult, specifically in East Boston. So we hope to make that happen for the community, and we hope to continue growing those opportunities, across Boston for the whole immigrant community. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much to our 3 panelists. This was an excellent conversation. I want to give an opportunity now to hear from the audience, whether you have questions, whether there's a comment you want to make based on something you heard in today's conversation. And I'll bring the mic over to you. So if you want to raise your hand, I'm mobile. Give me 1 second. Yes, go ahead. Yes, we do, because we want to hear what you have to say on the recording as well.
First, thank you all for coming, sharing your stories and your time. Francisco, I was just wondering, what's all the different co-ops that you've helped launch?
Yeah, great question. So there's co-ops that are part of our ecosystem. We're trying to create an ecosystem of cooperatives that can cooperate amongst cooperatives. That's actually an international principle that all cooperatives in the world actually comply with. There's 7 cooperative principles. So that's one of them. We're trying to support an ecosystem of cooperatives inside the nonprofit, but there's also a lot of co-ops that are starting outside. And we're also trying to, it's obviously, very limited capacity that we have because we are also a small organization, but there's so many other cooperatives in the works that we've been supporting. The Dorchester Food Co-op, although we were not directly involved, there was a lot of cooperation. We would share on their socials and we would promote their membership. So, indirectly or directly, we've supported the Dorchester Food Co-op. There's Broadway Bicycle, which is trying to convert. There's a big phenomenon called the Silver Tsunami, where a lot of businesses are retiring and the owners don't know what to do, either to sell out. And we hope that many of these businesses, we can keep them in the community. So, specifically to speak about our ecosystem of co-ops, like I mentioned, access to capital has been a big barrier for them. And, that's something that has been, about speaking about working through systems, that the only opportunity that they're offered really is debt products, like I mentioned. So it is difficult to get these projects up and running. But at the same time, with the great support of the city and Lenny Zakem Foundation, we've been able to get them to that point where some are already doing commercial operations, some are about to launch. Indirectly or directly, we've supported several cooperatives in the greater Boston area. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Other folks, questions, comments? Yes, in the back. You could introduce yourself.
My name is Mei Hong from the Chinese Culture Connection. We are in Malden, and I don't know how many people know about Malden. We have been in Malden for the last 25 years, and yet we still don't have a place. So we are very curious about how you can maybe come to Malden to secure space. We can share. For the last 20 years, I have come to realize that Malden has some kind of commercial spaces were being I would say monopolized by only a few, could be 2 or 3 or 4 within under 5 people, almost own 50%. I think maybe not, I'm exaggerating, but a huge percentage of the commercial space. And because no one can afford, and they are just huge, so it's untouchable and sitting right there for the last 20 years. And while in the nonprofit sector and the entire community is looking, scrambling for space to host our events, the city cannot do anything about it. So this is really a very sad situation for us. I would like to get some help. Chinese Culture Connection in Malden. Thank you.
I think that question was directed to me. But yeah, I think, that dynamic that you're analyzing is playing out everywhere, right? And as gentrification and displacement continues to scale, we're seeing this issue in greater cities around Boston, right? So to answer your question directly, I would suggest there is a Malden Community Land Trust, which I recommend that maybe you connect, and happy to connect you with them after. I believe they're quite a new organization. And, to acquire property and land, it takes a lot of time, a lot of capital. But I would be happy to connect you to them, or, if I can provide any information about how to create your own community land trust, happy to do that. There's also permanent real estate cooperatives, which are similar but different to CLTs, Community Land Trust. They function in the same way, where they're trying to preserve land and property for the community and stabilize it and keep it in the community's hands. But there's some legal differences about how the governance works, how the access to capital or the capital stack is going to look. So happy to connect after, and hopefully maybe I can connect you with the Malden CLT or provide any info after. Yeah.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, or if anyone's interested in answering to any of the things that were raised on the panel or any of the other things that we talked about?
Good afternoon. My name is Felicia. My pronouns are she. So one of the common threads that I heard, not just in terms of cooperatives, but this idea of building community, and I'm mindful that we're at an event called Bridge Builders. So I'm wondering, as a member of the board of the Lenny Zakem Fund, how could organizations best support your bridge building with similar or related organizations? How can we best build bridges and support your own building of bridges?
Thank you, Felicia.
I don't know if I fully understand the question. So, but you say how you can help the other organization, is that what you said?
Or how we can, well, you got it.
Or how organizations like LZF can best support organizations like yours to build communities, to come together with other organizations. How can we help build those bridges for you?
I think even today, bringing us here and sharing our story, we're going to start to get to know each other. For me, I don't know that many people at the other organization. My focus was always working in the community and making sure the family come out and share their stories. So the way I think you can help it out is maybe if the new person starting a nonprofit organization, to be connected somebody who more senior, who can help them how to find even maybe funding, how to connect to the community resources, the people who have a same mission and organization, what they're doing. I think that would be a good way to start. Because right now that organization I just shared with you, with the Black and African Coalition, I'm helping her how to set up the nonprofit. Before they were nonprofit, there was just a parent support group. So right now we are helping them how we start the organization, what is the documents they need to become nonprofit, as well also to join other advisory committees. So we both are learning together in a ways as well. So growing together, helping each other. That's how I do it.
Nahid, Francisco, any response?
So I would say 3 things. Collaborate and partner with community-based organizations. Amplify our work, our voices, communities' voices, and see events like this. So create that platform for community-based organizations to come and speak.
Thank you, Nahid. Francisco?
I don't think I could add anything more. They put it perfectly. But yeah, I would say the more amplification of our messages and our communities that we serve is always going to be fruitful. So yeah, I agree with everything that was said here. Yeah.
Beautiful. One final call for questions or comments related to this panel today. Excellent. Well, I thank you again so much. Thank you, Asha, Nahid, Francisco, for everything that you've shared today, for the amazing work that you're doing at your organizations, and for being such active and vital members of the Lenny Zakem Fund community as well. I also want to thank the City Hall and the Civic Pavilion space for hosting us today. Thank you to Kevin and Jordan for video recording today, and to Dana for taking care of us with beverages. And thank you all, our audience members, for being here today and just engaging in this conversation. We encourage you to hang out. We've got food, we've got beverages, and we'd love to get to know you and for you to get to know one another and engage in some networking as well. And so finally, I will say also thank you to Claire, our co-op, our program and development co-op, who has been vital in helping to organize this event, as well as to Allison and Madeline, who are our esteemed colleagues at the Lenny Zakem Fund. So thank you everyone so much for being here. Thank you for this conversation, and enjoy some nibbles and networking.
Thank you.